You didn't think you'd see me coming off my private jet, did you? The words came out of my mouth with a calmness I had rehearsed for 20 whole years. There they stood, my parents, standing in the doorway of the same white colonial house they had kicked me out of when I was only 18. My mother's face, Margaret, turned pale as if she had seen a ghost. My father, Robert, dropped the hose he was holding to water the garden. Water ran down the sidewalk as they watched me walk toward the front door, wearing an Italian suit that cost more than they earned in 6 months. My name is Nathan Turner, and at 38, I own a technology company valued at $500 million. But 2 decades ago, I was just a scared kid who dared to say no to the plans his parents had laid out for his life. Nathan? My mother whispered, as if saying my name would make me disappear again. Surprised? I asked, stopping a few feet away from them. I thought you might want to know how that story ended. Remember? When you called me a failure and kicked me out because I refused to marry Victoria Walsh. The silence that followed was deafening. I could see their minds racing, trying to process the information. The son they had discarded as a mistake was standing there, radiating success from every pore. You're back, my father managed to stammer. Temporarily, I replied, adjusting my fists. I'm in town to open my new office. You know, that 20-story building downtown? I just bought it outright. 20 years ago, it all started with a fight that would change my life forever. I had just graduated from high school with straight A's, a full scholarship to MIT, and dreams of building my own software company. My passion was programming. I spent entire nights writing code, imagining applications that could revolutionize the world. But my parents had other plans. Nathan, sit down, my mother had said on that fateful day in June. We have something wonderful to announce. I had been home for only 2 weeks since graduation, already eager to begin my journey to Boston. I had sold my used laptop and some games to buy advanced study materials. I was determined to excel at MIT from day one. The Walsh family owns the largest car dealership network in the state, my father had explained, his eyes shining with a greed I had never noticed before. Robert Walsh and I have struck a very advantageous deal. What kind of deal? I asked, a strange feeling forming in my stomach. That's when my mother smiled, that smile I now recognized as pure manipulation. You're going to marry Victoria Walsh at the end of the summer. It's a perfect match, she's beautiful, well-educated, and you'll be assured a prosperous future in his family's company. The world stopped. It literally stopped. You're joking, right? I asked, hoping it was some kind of bad joke. There's nothing funny about it, my mother replied, her voice taking on that icy tone I knew so well. Victoria is 19, she's been through private schools, and she'll make a perfect wife. You should be grateful for this opportunity. Thankful. The word came out as a scream. You're talking about a person I barely know. And I have a scholarship to MIT. I'm going to study software engineering. Nonsense, my father said, waving his hand as if my dreams were annoying flies. Programming is for lonely nerds. You need a real career, with real people. It was at that moment that I realized my parents never saw me as an individual. I was just a pawn in their social chess game, a way to climb the economic ladder in our small town. I'm not going to do this, I declared, standing up. I'm not going to give up my dreams to marry a stranger. The slap came so fast I didn't even see it. My mother's palm collided with my face with enough force to turn my head to the side. The sting spread across my cheek like fire. You're an ungrateful, selfish boy, she hissed. After everything we've done for you. And it was at that moment that something inside me broke. Not my spirit, my illusion about who my parents really were. If you're following this story of overcoming adversity and revenge, don't forget to subscribe to the channel because what happened next completely changed the course of my life. Because while they thought they were destroying me, they were actually creating the man who would one day return to show them exactly what it cost to underestimate their own children. You should be thanking us on your knees, my mother had continued, her voice cutting like broken glass. The Walsh family has influence throughout the state. Victoria is educated, beautiful, and most importantly, she comes with a dowry that will secure our future. Dowry. The word sounded like a punch in the stomach. You sold me, I whispered, the reality hitting me like a cold wave. You literally sold me. My father stood up abruptly, his face red with anger. Don't be dramatic, Nathan. It's a perfectly legitimate business arrangement. Robert Walsh offered you a partnership in his company in exchange for the marriage. You'll be a rich man before you're 25. What if I don't want to be rich that way? I shouted back. What if I want to build my own life? That's when my mother laughed. A cold, calculating sound that sent a chill down my spine. Your own life, she sneered. Nathan, you're an 18-year-old boy with no money, no connections, and no real future. Your little programming dreams won't pay the bills or give you the respect a man needs. He's right about one thing, my father added, folding his arms. You don't understand how the world works. People like us need strategies to get ahead in life. The Walshes have given us this golden opportunity. People like us. As if we were a family of refugees struggling to survive, not middle-class people with a house and cars in the garage. What exactly is your role in this business? I asked, my voice heavy with growing suspicion. My parents looked at each other, and I saw a flash of something that looked like guilt pass through my father's eyes before he composed himself. Robert Walsh offered me a minority partnership in the main dealership, he admitted. But this benefits the whole family, Nathan. Think of what it means for our social status, our financial security. And me? What do I get out of it besides a wife I barely know? You get everything, my mother replied with that coldness I was beginning to recognize as her true personality. Stability, a secure income, an established family. Victoria has already agreed to everything. She understands her role. Her role. I echoed, horrified. Being a good wife, giving you children, taking care of the house, she listed as if reading from a shopping list. Things real women do, not these modern feminists who want to compete with men. At that moment, I realized I didn't really know my parents. These cold, calculating people were strangers to me. Where was the father who taught me how to ride a bike? The mother who made pancakes on Sundays? They were gone, replaced by ruthless negotiators willing to trade their own child for social advancement. I'm not doing this, I repeated, more firmly this time. You can give up on this idea right now. The second slap came from my father. Harder than my mother's, leaving my ear ringing and my vision blurred for a few seconds. You will do this, he growled, his mask of civility finally slipping completely. Or you can forget any support from us. Without our help, you're nothing, Nathan. A spoiled boy who's never worked a day in his life. We've already set the dinner date for tomorrow night, my mother added, her voice returning to that false, sweet tone. Victoria and her parents are coming over to meet you properly. You will behave like a gentleman, court her appropriately, and accept the engagement. And if I don't show up? Then you can find another place to live, she replied without hesitation. Because we're not raising an ungrateful, disobedient son under our roof. The threat hung in the air like toxic smoke. They were actually willing to kick me out of the house over this. I spent that night locked in my room, analyzing my options. I could call some friends, but most of them were getting ready for college or had already left town. I could try talking to some teachers, but what advice could they give me about such an extreme situation? The next morning, I tried one last rational approach. Mom, Dad, I began over breakfast. I did some more research on MIT last night. My scholarship covers everything. Room, board, books. It won't cost you anything, and in 4 years I'll have a degree that will open up incredible opportunities. 4 years wasted, my mother muttered, not even looking up from the newspaper. Meanwhile, Victoria will be marrying another man, and the opportunity with the Walshes will be gone. Mom, please just listen to me. Enough, Nathan. She slammed the newspaper down on the table. Her decision is final. The Walshes are arriving at 7 o'clock tonight, and you will be here, well-dressed and with a respectful attitude. That afternoon, while my parents obsessively prepared for dinner, my mother rearranging the house for the third time, my father practicing business conversations in the mirror, I made a decision that would change my life forever. I dialed the number MIT had provided for urgent scholarship questions. Yes, this is Nathan Turner, I said to the attendant. I'd like to confirm my acceptance of the scholarship and ask about emergency accommodations for students in difficult family situations. The conversation lasted 20 minutes. When I hung up, I had a plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. At 6:30 p.m., my parents called me to get dressed. They found my room empty and a letter on my bed. Dear Mom and Dad, by the time you read this, I will be on my way to Boston. I have accepted my scholarship to MIT and will start my life as planned. I will not participate in your arranged marriage scheme, and I will not back down from this decision. If you ever understand that you tried to trade my future for personal gain, you know where to find me. Nathan. What they didn't know was that I had overheard my father's phone conversation with Robert Walsh the night before. Through the thin office wall, I heard every sordid word about how they would divide the benefits of my marriage, including a specific amount that would be transferred on the day of the ceremony. $50,000. That was my price, apparently. As I waited at the bus stop with only a backpack and the $400 I had saved from summer jobs, I heard screams coming from my house. First my mother, then my father, then both of them arguing frantically about how they would explain my absence to the Walshes. The bus arrived at 7:15, just as Victoria and her parents should have been ringing our doorbell. I didn't look back. But what happened that first week in Boston almost broke me completely. And it was only the beginning of a journey that would test every fiber of my determination. Because while my parents dealt with the humiliation of explaining my escape to their new business partners, I was discovering that surviving away from home, even with a scholarship, would be harder than any code I would ever try to crack. The first week at MIT was a reality check that nearly broke me. My scholarship covered room and board and books, but it didn't cover emergencies. And emergencies, I quickly discovered, were constant when you were completely alone at 18. My roommate, Derek, came from a wealthy Connecticut family. As I organized my few belongings into a drawer, he arrived with 2 cars full of furniture, electronics, and enough clothes to open a store. "Dude, where's the rest of your stuff?" he asked, looking at my single backpack. "This is it," I replied, trying to sound casual. The awkward silence that followed told me everything I needed to know about my social life there. But the real blow came 3 days later, when my phone rang during my first introduction to computer science class. Nathan. It was my mother's voice, but different. Cold. Calculating. "Mom, I'm in class." "Not anymore," she cut me off. "I called MIT and explained that you are a minor and ran away from home against our will. I also mentioned that you have psychological problems and self-destructive tendencies." My blood ran cold. "You did what?" "You have 48 hours to come home and apologize properly to the Walsh family, or we will call the police and report you for theft." "Theft? What theft?" "The laptop you took was not yours. It belonged to your father's company. Estimated value, $3,000. It was a lie. That old laptop I had bought with my own summer job money. But I realized they were willing to lie, to criminalize me, to force me to come back. You also," she continued with terrifying calm, "have violated important family agreements. The Walshes are considering suing our family for breach of contract. $50,000 in damages." The call ended with a sharp click. I sat in the hallway of the academic building, my hands shaking, watching my world crumble before it had even begun. Other students passed by, chatting animatedly about projects and parties, completely oblivious to the fact that my life was imploding. That's when Jennifer Park approached me. "Are you okay?" she asked, sitting down next to me on the cold hallway floor. Jennifer was Korean American, a scholarship student like me, and had grown up in a tough neighborhood in Los Angeles. Unlike Derek and most of our classmates, she understood what it meant to fight for every opportunity. "Family," I muttered, not trusting my voice to explain further. "Oh," she said, and somehow that single word carried all the understanding I needed. "Do you want to talk?" It was that afternoon, in a noisy coffee shop near campus, that I told the whole story to someone for the first time. Jennifer listened without judgment, occasionally asking practical questions about timing and legal details. "First," she said when I finished, "that's extortion. Second, you need a lawyer. Third, you're not alone in this. I can't afford a lawyer. MIT has legal services for students. And," she hesitated, "my older sister is a lawyer in Boston. She does pro bono work for students in difficult situations." For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. But my parents didn't stop there. Over the next 2 weeks, they escalated the psychological warfare in ways I never could have imagined. They called my academic advisor claiming that I had lied on my application about my family situation. They sent letters to the university president describing me as a troubled young man running away from his responsibilities. More painfully, I discovered they had hired a private investigator to find me and bring me home. The man showed up on campus, approaching my classmates, asking questions about my behavior and mental stability. "Your parents are concerned about your mental health," he said when he finally confronted me in the library. "They just want you to come home to get help." "I don't need help," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to be left alone." "Kid, you're 18 years old. You think you know everything, but you're making a mistake that will ruin your life." It was at that moment, sitting among piles of programming books in the quiet MIT library, that something fundamental changed inside me. I had spent 18 years trying to be the son they wanted me to be. Trying to live up to their expectations, mold myself to their plans, accept their definitions of success and failure. But there, being hunted like a criminal for choosing my own future, I realized a devastating truth. They didn't see me as a person. They never did. To them, I was an investment. An insurance policy. A ticket into the local high society. And when that investment didn't pay the dividends they expected, they were willing to destroy it completely. "You know what?" I said to the detective, closing my book and looking him straight in the eye. "Tell my parents they just made the worst decision of their lives." "What do you mean, kid?" "They thought they knew me. They thought they knew what I was capable of." I stood up, gathering my materials. But they spent so much time treating me like a piece of property that they never bothered to find out who I really am. The man laughed, a condescending sound. "And who are you then?" "Someone who's going to prove they were wrong about everything." That night, I called Jennifer and told her I was ready to meet her sister, the lawyer. Not just to defend me, but to understand exactly what my rights were and how I could protect them. I also started doing something that would change the course of my life, documenting everything. Every threatening phone call, every intimidation tactic, every attempt at sabotage was recorded, dated, and filed away. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. But it would be fought with the weapons I chose: information, persistence, and an absolute refusal to give up. The meeting with Catherine Park, Jennifer's sister, was revealing in ways I hadn't expected. "Nathan," she said after reviewing my notes, "your parents aren't just trying to force you to come back. They're committing several federal crimes in the process." "Like what?" "Extortion, harassment, making false statements to educational authorities. Every threatening phone call, every attempt to damage your academic reputation leaves a legal trail." She leaned forward, her expression serious. "But more importantly, you have something they didn't expect: you have real talent." Catherine had researched my programming projects, talked to my professors, reviewed my grades. What she discovered surprised me. Professor Williams said your code for the final project was the most innovative he'd seen in 5 years of teaching. "You're not just a good student, Nathan. You have the potential to be exceptional." For the first time since I left home, I allowed myself to feel genuine pride in what I was building. "I'm going to make you a proposal," Catherine continued. "Stop defending yourself and start attacking. Not violently, not illegally, but through absolute, undeniable success." "What do you mean?" "Become so successful, so visibly brilliant, that any attempt on their part to harm you will only make them look petty and vindictive." That conversation planted the seed of an idea that would grow into my obsession. I would not just survive away from my family. I would thrive in such a spectacular way that it would be impossible to ignore how wrong they were. But what Catherine didn't know, what I hadn't even told Jennifer yet, was what really motivated me during those sleepless nights of studying. It wasn't just to prove I was right. It was to ensure that one day when I was ready, I could return to my hometown not as the prodigal son begging forgiveness, but as the man they rejected becoming exactly what they always dreamed of being. And when that day came, the look on their faces when they saw me stepping off my own private jet would be just the beginning of the lesson I would spend a lifetime planning to teach them. The conversation with Catherine changed my perspective completely. Instead of just defending myself, I began to build something that would render any attack from my parents irrelevant. Over the next 3 months, I immersed myself in my studies with an intensity that impressed even my most demanding teachers. While other students went out partying on the weekends, I spent hours in the computer lab, developing projects that went beyond the basic curriculum. My first breakthrough came when I created an algorithm to optimize real-time inventory systems. Professor Williams was so impressed that he connected me with a local startup that was facing exactly that problem. "Nathan," said the company's CEO, David Chun, after a 20-minute presentation of my project, "how old did you say you were?" 18, I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "And how long have you been programming?" "Since I was 13. David and his partners looked at each other. "We want to buy your solution. And we want you to work with us as a consultant." The contract I signed that afternoon earned me $5,000, more money than I had ever seen in my life. But more important than the money was the confirmation that my talent had real market value. Meanwhile, my parents stepped up their tactics in a way that surprised me with its cruelty. I discovered that they had hired a second private investigator, this time to investigate my mental stability and collect evidence that I was dangerously unstable. He showed up on campus pretending to be a journalist interested in young prodigies, and tried to ask me leading questions about my family and my mental health. More disturbingly, I learned from Jennifer that someone had called her family in Los Angeles, claiming to be a concerned educational advisor, and asking questions about our friendship and whether she had noticed any worrying behavior in me. "They're trying to build a case to have you committed," Catherine explained during our second meeting. "If they can gather enough evidence of mental instability, they can request temporary guardianship, even though you're an adult." The calculated coldness behind this strategy shocked me more than anything they had done before. It wasn't just about forcing me to come home, it was about destroying my credibility and autonomy completely. "But they've made a mistake," Catherine continued, opening a thick folder. "Every move they make leaves a legal trail. We have evidence of harassment, defamation, and attempts to interfere with your education. If they escalate further, we can sue them for a fortune." That night, I made a decision that would define the next 20 years of my life. Instead of just defending myself or fighting back legally, I decided to do something that would render them completely powerless, become indisputably successful. I began meticulously documenting every project, every note, every recognition I received. I created a digital portfolio that showcased not only my technical work, but also my ability to solve complex problems and generate real value. More importantly, I began building a network of professional connections that extended far beyond the walls of MIT. The second contract came through David Chun, who recommended me to a consulting firm that needed someone to modernize its legacy systems. The third came via Professor Williams, who mentioned my name at an industry conference. If you're following this journey of overcoming adversity and determination, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, because what happened over the next 2 years completely changed the game between me and my family. Little by little, I began to realize that I was building something much bigger than a career. I was creating an identity completely independent of the version my parents had of me. But they didn't give up easily. 6 months after running away from home, I received a phone call that almost broke me psychologically. "Nathan." It was my father's voice, but different. Weaker, almost pleading. "How did you get my number?" "Your friend Derek gave it to us." "Listen, son, your mother is in the hospital." My blood ran cold. "What happened?" "She had a nervous breakdown. The doctors say it's because of the stress of what happened between us. She won't stop crying and repeating that she lost her son." The guilt hit me like a punch in the stomach. For a moment, all my anger and determination wavered. "Nathan, you need to come back. She needs to know you're okay, that we're still a family." "Dad. Please. Just a visit. Just so she can see you're okay." I hung up the phone with my hands shaking. For 2 hours, I paced the halls of the dorm, alternating between devastating guilt and growing suspicion. It was Jennifer who helped me see the situation clearly. "Nathan, you said your mother was a master manipulator, right? That she always knew exactly which buttons to push to get what she wanted." I nodded slowly. "Then why would it be any different now?" The next morning, I called the hospital my father had mentioned. There was no Margaret Turner there. Not in any hospital in the area. The call had been completely fabricated. At that moment, any trace of guilt or family nostalgia I still carried evaporated completely. They were willing to fake a medical emergency to manipulate me emotionally. That's when I realized that the war between us had no rules. And if there were no rules, I could play to win too. I began planning not only my professional success, but also my eventual return. Not as the prodigal son begging forgiveness, but as the man they rejected coming back to show them exactly how costly their mistake had been. Every project I completed, every connection I made, every dollar I earned became a piece on the chessboard I was setting up for a game they didn't even know they were losing. Because while they wasted time and energy trying to force me back into the past, I was systematically building a future where their opinions and approval would become completely irrelevant. And when the time was right, when I had built something so impressive that it would be impossible to ignore, I would return home. Not to reconcile, but to demonstrate the true cost of trying to control someone who was born to fly higher than they ever imagined possible. 3 days after our initial meeting, I returned to my parents' house with Michael, my husband and business partner, and our 5-year-old daughter Emma. This time, I didn't arrive alone in a rental car. We arrived in a motorcade that included my personal assistant, 2 lawyers, an accountant, and a private investigator who had provided me with devastating information about my parents' current financial situation. "Nathan," my mother said as she opened the door, her eyes widening at the sight of the group of professionally dressed people behind me, "we weren't expecting an entourage." I finished, stepping inside uninvited. Well, when you're about to make a $400,000 acquisition, it's important to have the proper documentation. My father appeared in the room, his face visibly turning pale. "Acquisition. Please sit down," I instructed as my lawyers opened their briefcases on the dining room table that had witnessed so many family battles 2 decades earlier. "We have important matters to discuss." What followed was the most satisfying conversation of my adult life. "I discovered some interesting things during my research on you," I began, leafing through meticulously organized documents. "For example, that Robert Walsh's company, that family you wanted me to marry into, went spectacularly bankrupt 15 years ago. Tax fraud, money laundering, the whole operation collapsed." My mother and father looked at each other, clearly uncomfortable. "Even more interesting," I continued, "was discovering that you tried to sabotage my personal relationships even after I left home." "What are you talking about?" my father muttered. My private investigator opened a thick file. "Jennifer Park, my best friend at MIT. You called her family pretending to be educational counselors and implied that I was mentally unstable. Catherine Park, her sister, a lawyer. You tried to file a false complaint against her with the Bar Association for incorrectly advising a minor." My mother was turning visibly pale. "David Chun, the CEO who gave me my first consulting contract. You called his company claiming I had stolen intellectual property from the family. Fortunately, David was too smart to believe you." "Nathan, we were just trying," my father began. "Protect your investments," I interrupted. "Because that's what I found out about the Walsh deal. It wasn't just $50,000 you were getting for my marriage. It was a 20% stake in their company, plus a $200,000 house as a family dowry." The silence in the room was deafening. "You literally sold me for $350,000, I continued, my voice remaining calmly controlled. "And when I refused to be a commodity, you spent years trying to destroy every opportunity one created for myself." It was then that I revealed the first real twist. "But here's the interesting part," I said, opening another file. "All these years, while you were wasting your energy trying to sabotage my life, I was systematically buying up all your debts." "What?" my mother whispered. "The mortgage on this house? I bought the bank loan 3 years ago through a subsidiary company." "Your car loans?" "Mine. The credit card you used to pay Dad's medical bills after his heart surgery? Also mine." My father's hands were shaking visibly. "Technically," I explained with the patience of someone explaining basic math to a child, "I own you." Michael, who had been silent until then, leaned forward. "But my husband isn't a cruel person like you. That's why he's here to make you an offer." I placed a contract on the table. Option 1. I collect all debts immediately. You lose your house, your cars, everything. Considering the acceleration clauses and accrued interest, you owe approximately $600,000. Given your age and current financial situation, you will never be able to pay it back." My mother began to cry silently. "Option 2, I continued, you accept this contract. I pay off all your debts, pay your outstanding medical bills, and put $200,000 into a retirement account that will guarantee you a comfortable life for the next 20 years. And in return?" my father asked, his voice almost inaudible. "In return, you sign a full confession admitting all attempts to sabotage my career and agree to never again interfere in my life or the lives of my family. And, added one of my lawyers, you agree to participate in family therapy, paid for by Mr. Turner, to work on your relationship with your son and granddaughter. That's when my mother finally exploded. "This is blackmail," she shouted, standing up abruptly. "No," I replied calmly, "this is poetic justice. You tried to sell me for money 20 years ago. Now I'm offering to buy your redemption for the same price." "I'll never sign that," she declared, crossing her arms. That's when I revealed the final twist. "Mom," I said, picking up Emma for the first time since we arrived, "I want you to meet your granddaughter. Emma, this is Grandma Margaret I've told you about." Emma waved shyly. "Grandma, Daddy said you and Grandpa are sorry you were méchants to him when he was little." The French word Emma used, méchant, mean, hit my mother like a physical slap. "Emma also speaks French, German, and is learning Mandarin," I explained casually. "She goes to a private school that costs $60,000 a year. Michael and I believe that education and choices are the best gifts we can give our children." My mother slumped back into her chair, finally understanding the magnitude of what they had lost. "You have 72 hours to decide," he said, gathering the documents. "After that, the offer expires and I'll execute all the liens." As we walked toward the door, my father finally found his voice. "Nathan, wait." I turned to face him. "You've become exactly the man we hoped you would be," he said, tears streaming down his face. "Successful, prosperous, respected. We just wanted it to be through us." "Dad," I replied, adjusting Emma in my arms, "you never wanted me to be successful. You wanted me to be obedient. There's a fundamental difference." I dropped the final bombshell as I opened the door. "Oh, and about Victoria Walsh? She found me on LinkedIn 5 years ago. She wanted to thank me for refusing to marry her. Apparently, she always knew she was a lesbian, but her family was forcing her into marriage to hide it. Today she's a human rights lawyer married to a wonderful woman with 2 adopted children." The sound of my mother sobbing was the last thing I heard as the door closed behind us. 3 days later, I got a call. "Nathan." My father's voice was broken, humble. We'd like to sign the contract. And start therapy. If you'll still let us get to know Emma properly." As I drove back to the airport in my rental car, with the signed contract on the passenger seat, I realized that the sweetest revenge hadn't been taking their money or exposing their hypocrisy. It had been proving that the son they discarded as a failure had become precisely the man they dreamed of being but never had the courage or integrity to become. And now, finally, we would have the chance to find out if they were capable of loving the real man I had become, instead of the puppet they had tried to create. 6 months later, our first family therapy session was exactly as uncomfortable as I had expected. "Nathan is right about our attempt to control him," my mother admitted to the therapist, her words coming out with difficulty. "We treated our son like a business transaction instead of a person." My father, sitting stiffly beside her, added, "We spent 20 years trying to justify the unjustifiable. We kicked our son out because he dared to have dreams of his own." Emma, quietly playing with her building blocks in the corner of the room, occasionally looked up to watch the adults talking about feelings. For her, these sessions were just special time with Grandpa and Grandma. "Nathan," Dr. Sarah Wilson asked, "how do you feel hearing this?" "Relieved," I answered honestly. For 20 years, I carried the doubt that maybe I was wrong. That maybe I should have been more obedient, more grateful. The transformation wasn't instantaneous, but it was real. 3 months of weekly therapy revealed layers of family dynamics that none of us had fully understood. My mother, we discovered, had grown up in extreme poverty and developed an obsession with financial security that distorted her perspective on success. My father had been raised by an authoritarian man and never learned to question authority or stand up for his own convictions. It didn't excuse what they did, but it explained it. "You gave me the greatest gift possible," I told Dr. Wilson during our 10th session. "By rejecting me for following my own dreams, you taught me never to do that to Emma." The real test came when Emma turned 6 and expressed interest in 3 completely different activities: ballet, kids coding, and cooking classes. "Can we do all of them?" she asked with that innocent childlike expectation. "Of course," I replied without hesitation. "Let's try them all and see what you like best." My mother, who was visiting that weekend, watched the interaction silently. Later, while Emma was asleep, she approached me in the kitchen. "You're a better father than we deserve as grandparents," she said, her words heavy with meaning. "It's not about deserving," I replied. "It's about choosing to do things differently." The Pittsburgh office thrived beyond my expectations. My father, ironically, became one of my most valuable employees. His meticulous attention to detail and genuine rapport with clients were exactly what our customer service division needed. "I never thought I'd work for my own son," he confessed to me during one of our weekly lunches that had become a tradition. "Technically, you work for me," I corrected him. "We're a team now." The most significant change came when Emma turned 7 and decided she wanted to understand Daddy's sad story. We sat together in the garden of the house Michael and I bought in Pittsburgh, the same street where I grew up, but 5 houses down, and I explained in a way appropriate for her age about choices, consequences, and forgiveness. "Did Grandpa and Grandma make a lot of mistakes when you were little?" she asked. "Yes, they made some serious mistakes. But now they're good grandparents. Now they're learning to be." "And have you forgiven them?" I paused, considering the question with the care it deserved. "I'm learning to forgive," I replied. "Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending that bad things didn't happen. It means choosing not to let the pain of the past control our future." Emma nodded with a seriousness that only children can bring to complex concepts. "Daddy," she said finally, "you're very smart." "Why?" "Because you turned a sad story into a good story." That night, as she slept, I realized that Emma had captured in a few words what had taken me years to understand. My most powerful revenge wasn't buying my parents' debts or exposing their attempts at sabotage. It was breaking the cycle of control and creating a family based on unconditional love and mutual respect. Today, at 38, I run a company valued at $500 million, have a marriage based on true partnership, and am raising my daughter to believe that her dreams matter. My parents, now in their 70s, spend Sundays with us, watching Emma build increasingly elaborate towers with her blocks, occasionally offering suggestions that she considers carefully before accepting or politely rejecting. "Nathan," my mother said last Sunday, watching Emma patiently explain to Michael how her tower would work as an elevator for fairies, "how did you manage to be so patient with us?" "I learned that anger is useful for motivating change," I replied, "but forgiveness is necessary to build something lasting." The last time I spoke with Victoria Walsh, now Victoria Chun, was 6 months ago, when she congratulated me on my Forbes article about entrepreneurs who prioritize family. "Thank you for saying no," she wrote. "If we had gotten married, neither of us would have found our true happiness." She was right. The arranged marriage would have destroyed not only my dreams, but hers as well. Sometimes the greatest kindness is having the courage to disappoint the people we love in order to protect our authenticity. If this story of overcoming adversity, forgiveness, and building something better touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more real stories from people who turned their greatest pains into their greatest triumphs. Because in the end, I discovered that the most lasting success doesn't come from proving we were right, but from using our victory to create a world where more people can choose their own paths without fear of rejection. Emma doesn't know yet that she's heir to $500 million. But she knows with absolute certainty that she is loved exactly as she is, dreams and all. And that, I realized, is the only inheritance that really matters.